Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, October the 18th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this Thursday morning. We hope your Thursday's off to a terrific start. It's off to a cold start here in the Northeast. We are currently dealing with temperatures in the low 30s, which is not uncommon for New England, but it's a little colder than we would like, and we're looking forward to the day warming up because we don't want it to stay there, Joel.
Well, I happen to love cold weather, so I'm in Central Virginia as we're speaking. It's about 45 degrees, and I would actually be grateful. I am grateful for the 45 degrees, and I'll equally be grateful when we get into the 30s. So
okay,
it's all about perspective.
It is perspective, no doubt about it, no doubt about it. And in fact, that's kind of the root of the topic for today, because time is one of those things that we kind of take for granted, but philosophers and scientists and a variety of different people, spiritualists, have all told us that time isn't what we think it is, that it's a little bit different from what we think. And the more that I explore that topic, the more my mind boggles. So I figured it was time to unboggle my mind and actually delve into this and see if we can make sense out of the topic. But before we get there, I want to make sure we get our promos in for the day. First and foremost, as everyone who is a regular listener knows, we're looking for everyone to become subscribers. And interestingly enough, Joel, it turns out that when I look at the numbers, somewhere around 20 to 35% of our listenership on any given day are not subscribers. And we'd love them to become subscribers. Can you imagine that? It's really true. I mean, we're so used to having so many subscribers sign up that we forget there are people who listen who just, haven't become a subscriber, or maybe this is their first episode or whatever. So we want to urge you, please do subscribe. You get a lot of great content coming right to your smartphone every single day. It's real easy to do. If you're not sure how to do it, we've got instructions on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net. They're just icons for you to click there, one for an Android phone, one for an iPhone or iPad, and a third one for people who are using another kind of operating system besides the big two. And you just follow the steps after that. But please do become a subscriber. It really does pay off for you. And then after you subscribe, this is the second message that we do every day, please do share the fact that you're listening to loatoday.net on your favorite social media channel, because the campaign to do exactly that is helping us reach more and more people every day who are not aware of your daily dose of happy and who could certainly use it. And I continue to say, Joel, my greatest dream is to have hundreds of thousands, millions of people getting their daily dose of happy, and then imagining as best I can how that would change the world. I mean, I really believe that our worldwide society would shift hugely for the better if more and more people just had a better feeling perspective to start their day, just because of what we know about how the law of attraction works. And so, I mean, that's my dream. That's what I keep hoping and praying is going to happen.
Well, and that, a lot of people of similar mindset to ours has that same view or that same hope that we will get to a place where the majority of the people or whatever number will start to believe or feel this way and understand the power. And then that would literally change the country. If we could get to a place of positive thought, of realizing we attract what we put out there, that everybody's opinion and perspective is theirs to control, and they're not the enemy, and all the message that the law of attraction brings, the responsibility the law of attraction brings is such an incredible message that you're right. It does represent a changing of thought and a removal of victimhood, and that's one of our horrible curses our country faces, is that whole concept that we have to sort of live in that way. And law of attraction tells us differently. And that's that message. If more people, it could be our podcast that you mentioned the other day or moments ago that, and I heard from someone the other day, there are people that randomly find us. Somebody was actually looking for something, and I forget what they said they were looking for in a podcast, has zero to do with law of attraction and had nothing to do with any of that. However, they somehow ran across, they mistakenly listened to our podcast, and now are just loving what we're talking about. And so the idea that we're reaching people, and this person person had a really nice perspective of things and said that the podcast was very helpful. And again, randomly ran across that.
Yeah.
So when people share it, it is something that when we do this, a lot of people think that we have ulterior motives. And we do. We believe in this so strongly. We'd love to share it. And I've never made really a secret about, I would love for this to become mainstream. I would love for us to be on a nationwide radio stream on XM radio with all of my co-hosts spread out over the day. I make no bones about that. Not only would I love that personally, I think the message would resonate. But for right now, we're reaching a really big audience. We continue to grow, and I'm really just excited to see where this is going to go. And when we're in the middle of where we're at right now, you just got to take a breath. When we started, you and I, when we first started doing podcasts together, I think there were many weeks it was you and I listening to each
Pretty
other,
much,
and
yeah.
that was it.
Maybe a few others, but not many.
Right. And so to talk about the numbers that you're talking about is just astronomical and really makes me grateful for that. So yes, anything you can do that any of our listeners, just simply mentioning in social media, like Joel's an idiot, anything that will get, anything that helps. I'm good with it as long as you get along with, that would be helpful. It really is. The people that I hear from it's humbling to have people reach out and say that somehow, in some remote place in the United States or even another country, somebody to touch base with us and we've had an impact on them. It's amazing to look at the path that led us to that. So in a bigger picture, I'm just grateful for all of this, Walt. I really am.
I am too. I'm really grateful for all of our listeners who keep sticking with us through thick and thin. And just the other day, Cindy got a tweet from somebody who described himself as one of our binge listeners. And I read that. It just gave me this warm feeling inside. Like, there's another one. People who just love to keep listening to our podcast. Like you said, there was a time when it was just you and me and maybe, family members listening. That was about it. And now, oh my goodness, It has been such a tremendous journey getting to this point. So yes, thank you for pointing that out and remembering that. It's very important.
Yes.
Now the last 7.5 minutes of this show apparently are an illusion. Now, it was a really good illusion. I mean, we were talking about something that was very important, but apparently it was an illusion. And that's a tough idea to swallow sometimes. But it made for a good topic, especially since you posted along this line on your Facebook timeline about how you believe that time is an illusion. So I want to get your perspective on it. I mean, what happened to the last 8 minutes? Did I imagine it?
Well, there's multiple veins, and as our audience that are regular listeners know, they keep up with just how much energy and effort I put into these topics before the show starts. So I'm what that means is Walt tells me 1 minute before we go on air what our topic is. So,
That's it.
So what you're getting from me is just sort of an unrehearsed answer, but I feel it's so much better when it is that way, at least the way my brain operates. So I love this topic because you can approach this topic from philosophical levels or law of attraction levels. But to me, the basis of time is something that humans came up with to measure a lifespan or measure, something that goes on. Humans had to come up with some way of saying, yes, we need a measurement here. We need to be able to, these babies are born and then they die and they turn into old people and they die. So, I mean, along the way, they need, it just naturally develops. So let's start measuring time. So the closest they could come to is, well, if we're keeping track of all those years, apparently, whether they thought the sun was moving or the earth was moving, but whatever that combination for them at the time was, it took 1 year for the cycle to take place. Then as they were able to study it a little more, it's not quite exactly a year. So we need to add a little day here, some time here, seconds here every now and then.
Right.
And so so you can even see within time, it's like, okay, here's time. Oh, by the way, we have to throw in an extra day in February every 4 years just because we don't have it quite right. And when you look at all of that cumulative collection of time. It's a great way to mark events. January 1st, in 1901. We know events. You can Google that date, and there'll be stuff that happened on that date.
Mm-hmm.
So time is a representative for humans, in my perspective, of what goes on. But when you get into a more philosophical understanding of time, the only relevant moment, from my perspective, is this exact moment right now. What has happened, like you said, 8 minutes ago, 9 minutes ago, while it's a memory for us, it has no bearing on right now. It only has the bearing we give it. And I don't know if we take another breath after the next minute. I believe we will, but it's not relevant to where I'm active in my mindset right now. So the concepts of one of my favorite books is The Power of Now. And a lot of the concepts are there. My soul power exists right in this moment. Now, for most people to understand that, it's like, well, Joel, that's just sort of gobbledygook. But when you really think about it, since I'm an action-oriented person, action takes place right now. I can worry about my action tomorrow. I can worry about the bill collectors tomorrow. I can worry about what's happening tomorrow. Or I can focus in my moment of action right now. And when I'm in that safety of the moment of now, everything's fine. Anxiety comes from when I step away from the moment of now. So the illusion of time, for some people, and for many people, it is actually a very distracting event in their life. The illusion of time, there's artificial deadlines that we put in place. There's things we put in place that cause us stress and then the worry, and how I'm tying it into the law of attraction is when I'm worried about tomorrow, then I am putting out the field of worry or anxiety, no matter what it's about, versus living in right now where I do control so much. I have great power in this moment. I have actions I can take. I can fix problems. I can do things right now, again, stuff that's in my control. However, tomorrow hasn't happened. Tomorrow may not happen, but I can't get stuck on that. Now, I understand I have to do things today that in anticipation of the more than likelihood of tomorrow, but I have no power in tomorrow. And when I try to put any energy put toward tomorrow, robs me of all of my energy today. I mean, it's a great power drain versus that focus on. And here's a great example that I realized when my understanding of this started taking place is in 1995, when I got into recovery from my addiction, I was facing severe consequences. I was, I had criminal charges that were being filed against me for money that I had stolen from a company that I was working for. I was in desperate straits, and I ended up in this halfway house on Anna Maria Island in Florida. And, I had to get, I was clueless. When you look at the overwhelming picture of what it was just unbelievable, Walt, all the things that I was facing. And there was no humanly possible way that I could overcome this. I mean, I had felony criminal charges that were going to be filed. I had $250,000 in credit card debt. I owed my family a fortune. They weren't speaking to me. My fiance had dumped me. All this stuff had happened. And all of it was out of my control. It was so overwhelming. So as I lived in the moment of that day, but was putting all of my thought and all of my energy toward that, I was paralyzed by time or my perception of time. The artificial deadline of tomorrow, or I've got to fix this, and I could not fix it in tomorrow. But what I found was there was a solution in today. And one of the first things I did, I went and got a job waiting tables. And while I truly hated waiting tables, and I mean that sincerely, that was a rough job. It was a brutal. However, when I started waiting tables, I was focused on getting the order into the kitchen. I was focused on getting the kitchen to get the food out to the customer. I was focused on getting the bill to the customer. I was focused on making the customer have a good experience so I'd get a good tip. And those 4 or 5 hours that I was waiting tables, an amazing thing happened, Walt. I was forced to live in now. That moment of now. I was forced to live there. I could not worry about what's going to happen. I could be arrested the next morning. I could be arrested when I walked out of the job.
Yeah.
But I couldn't focus on that. All I could focus was my nose to the grindstone of getting it done. And I got those things done. And then at the end of the time, I realized, wait a minute, I've actually taken a tiny, tiny bite out of what I got to do. And while I certainly have no power in tomorrow, I understood that those 4 hours were my power. And that's where my time existed. And I got to choose that. So the illusion of time is also an illusion of it brings fear when you fear can be part of time. But when you realize there isn't a moment that matters, then right now, as our audience is listening to this, whether you're listening to us live on Thursday morning, on the 18th of October, or you're listening to us 2 weeks from now, your moment of time is where your power exists. You are in charge of all the actions and all the thoughts that are taking place in this moment. So when you start looking at time in a way, one of the things that I have always been fascinated by is, I remember as a child, and you're sitting in class and you're looking at that clock. There's, this classic school clock,
right,
the white with the black letters, and numbers on it. It's just like, you could literally see it click. When school got out at 3:35 and it was 3:30, those 5 minutes were forever.
They were endless.
They were endless. And also another thing, another point of time is those of you who are baseball fans, the baseball game, Lord, they're endless. They go on and they go on. And I had to get that in there, Walt. I'm sorry. I know you're having a good baseball season right now. So, but within that concept of time, again, we use the word perspective of time. And what is going on in your life? When I was doing something fun, it was like, oh my gosh, the fun stuff lasts very quickly, but the stuff you hate, that takes forever. And again, it was a perception of things. And I realize now, as I've grown older, I used to hear time goes so much faster as you grow older. Well, it does. Your perception of time changes greatly. A year, which seemed like an overwhelming number in my teens, now it's like a year. It's hard to believe that, I can't believe we're at another Halloween coming up in a few weeks. It's amazing to me that that's happening so quickly.
Yeah.
And again, that perception of time. So when you can perceive something, even though it's a tangible second, is something that's measurable, your perception of time is why time is an illusion, because the perception is what it's all about. It's not the time. And I know that's a lot of stuff to cover, but it is a unique version. Time is a measurement tool that humans created, but it is really artificial in its creation because it's just used as a measurement device. It doesn't, because a minute could be forever, or a minute could be seemingly less than a second. And simply, time is about your perspective.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. In fact, you were talking about the stuff you were going through 20-odd years ago. And when Eckhart Tolle wrote the book, The Power of Now, which you referenced earlier, he also was in pretty difficult circumstances, different kinds of circumstances from yours. But nevertheless, he was going through some pretty rough stuff. And it's partly what motivated him to write the book in the first place. Because through that concept, through that perspective of just focusing on right now and not even going to past or future, just letting go of all that, just staying right in the present moment, he found solace. He found relief from all of the pain, the suffering, the anxiety, the worry, the consternation, the disappointment that he was experiencing when he was thinking about the future in most cases, or in some cases the past. And realizing there was really nothing he could do about them, just as you're pointing out, that it was beyond his power. But what was in his power, again, as you pointed out, was what's going on right now, because that's where we live. And it's true. We only live in the now. In fact, Cindy and I were talking about, just the other day, we've been reading one of Neville Goddard's books called Out of This World over the last few episodes that I've done with her. And we were remarking on the idea that Goddard was presenting, that if you understand time as the fourth dimension and you kind of look at a human being living in 4 dimensions, where time is the 4th dimension. It's almost like you have a series of scenes, like in, say, a cartoon film strip, where you have frame, 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 frame. Each frame is one split second later, one split second later. And when you look at the whole thing, you get a moving picture. Well, you can also imagine it as like a 3-dimensional image that builds itself like a worm, with the figure constantly changing its motions and doing things and saying things and so forth. And this long worm represents the human lifespan over, when you spread it out over time. And in that sense, you can actually see the entire lifespan of a human being all in one look, all in one view. And that's another way of understanding that time is an illusion, because when you're looking at it in that view, there is no duration. It's just, there's the whole thing from beginning to end. So, again, is time real? Is it an illusion? There are people who, when you posted your post, you had at least one person who said, well, time is real. And I'm thinking to myself, the moment that she said time is real is the moment she said she wasn't living in the now.
Right. And if you look at all the suffering, all the and again, I'll do some. I know there'll be somebody listening that will not understand this. If you're, depression is a real thing, and this is not a medical show. This is just talking about, metaphysical thought and law of attraction thought. So I say that because most depression is based on the perception of what has happened out of regret in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's what most depression is.
Mm-hmm.
Most anxiety is based on the fear of what is going to happen in the future.
Right.
And you can almost judge where someone's at, and when I say judge, if I'm in a life coaching role of where their stress and anxiety or their regret, which leads to a depressive type feeling, comes from, what's bothering you. It, almost where they tell you, I'm worried about this tomorrow. Okay, well, let's look at the historical facts that's causing you to worry about tomorrow. The entire time you're not focusing on today. I have a client who has a very important interview today at 1:00 Eastern time.
Wow.
And it's with a massive company. It's a very important job, and we were doing some last minute talking yesterday. And this she's an incredible lady, and she'll make you great. I have no doubt she'll get the job, and she's on the right mindset. But she's spent her entire life preparing for this type job, and to literally be looking, well, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, and we got her. I said, look, who is more capable of this job? And it's such a great, I don't want her to go in with arrogance, because that would be perceived as something, but going with confidence is an entirely different thing. And you base your confidence on your strength. When you understand your strength is right now, that's where it takes place. And I know exactly when we start focusing on the time element as time is this artificial illusion that we are stressing about. It really creates this dynamic that the human mind, I don't think, was ever really meant to comprehend it or have to deal with, because what our power exists in right now, that we use the analogy before that, and I'll sort of go back there too. If you picture a gazelle being chased by a lion, and the gazelle's amazingly fast and nimble, but the lion is powerful and is going to crush the gazelle. But the gazelle makes a quick right turn and goes over this rock, and the lion's too big to get through this little hole, and the gazelle gets to the other side. Okay, what does the gazelle start doing? Okay, it's over. Let's just start, just starts eating some grass. It's like, okay, that's what happened.
Right.
A human. Let's update the situation to a human. A human is driving through an intersection. A car runs through the red light. The human slams on his brake and swerves to the right, and the other car barely misses him. And the human sits there and, oh my God, what? And it spends the entire day of what almost happened. The gazelle doesn't have the concept of time, so in a sense, the gazelle's like, well, it's irrelevant. I mean, the lion, that's been like 8 seconds ago the lion chased me. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter to the gazelle. I'm hungry. I got to eat. Where the human, will tell that story 50 times in a day on how they were almost killed and how they, how they unintentionally are maybe even attracting another accident. So the perception that we control solely exists in right now. So when you fall into the vast, illusion of time, you lose control of your perception, your perspective of right now, and then you lose control of your power. And what I'm saying is something, well, that's great, Joel. That's, sounds so easy when you say it. It's not,
right.
because we are conditioned. It's impossible on some level, to not have that what is going to happen tomorrow. It really is almost impossible not to, but the more you learn to focus and the more you live in right now, time has no issue when you're living in right now. Time is simply what you this is where time, all that matters exists. And if you can stay there the majority of your day, you're going to get so much done. And then tomorrow will not be near as stressful when you can do that. But that's a lot of roundabout talk, but it's such an incredible perspective that philosophers have discussed for years. And, the idea that everybody sees time from their own lens. Somebody doing life in prison, I've talked to people who have done 30 years in prison before, and they describe the first couple of years as incredibly horrible. Just you could not comprehend what the thought of being there for 30 years looked like. And then at some point you adapt to it, and the next 28 years seem to go by relatively quickly from their perspective, because they had to adjust all of that, and they had to adjust what they were viewing. And many people that have been in prison for that period of time, when I say many, I've talked to 3 or 4, so that's not a good sampling, but the ones that I've spoken with that use that time for incredible transformation. And while they certainly don't want to do or even have 30 more years to devote to prison again, they certainly feel that they use that period of growth, so they don't view it as wasted time like most people would think they would.
Yeah, good point. And I guess that's part of what your message tends to be and has been since you and I have been doing the show together, which is that when we're in our darkest hour, that's when we tend to have the greatest ability to live in that now and to emerge victorious.
Yes. One of my favorite clients of all time is he was a bomb diffuser. It is such a, what I mean, but he would, in the Middle East, what he would do is he would, when there would be a bomb that was not exploded, it would hit on the ground in a compound or near where our troops were. He would be called in to defuse these bombs. Now, they're very dangerous. I mean, you don't even need to say it's a very dangerous job.
Yeah,
Clearly,
really.
You're defusing bombs. So it's a very dangerous bomb, very dangerous job. So what he did, he was telling me about this one time, and I forget the name of the city, but it was somewhere in Iraq, and they have this compound that this bomb had landed in the middle of the compound, and it did not explode, but it's just sticking out of the ground. This bomb sticking out of the ground, and he was called to go defuse the bomb. Well, as the bomb hit, there were insurgents or bad people coming and shooting. And well, there's women and children in this compound. There's soldiers in this compound. They're defending the compound. They have bullets coming over the walls, people coming, and shooting. Well, he had to defuse the bomb with all that going on.
Yeah.
And he had the ability to tune all the noise out, study how the bomb was set up, because they're all done differently. Some of them have triple, and he's obviously a genius at looking at this stuff. He's a brilliant man. And he's looking at it and figuring out what it is like the movies. If you cut the wrong wire, you blow up everybody. If you cut the right wire, you're safe. And so he's studying this bomb, and he's having to really focus. And while that's going on, he said all sound would disappear. There'd be no peripheral vision. He said he felt a hollow feeling as he's studying that bomb and realized, and he would look at it, and he said it took him about 9 minutes He followed the wire. He had 2 wires to cut. And when he cut the second wire, the moment he cut it and the bomb, it was clearly diffused, all the sound came rushing back. All the noise. Time went from standing still in his vision to the flurry of a war.
Wow.
And he described that. And it's actually one of the tools that he was dealing with a lot of issues, like many of our men and women that come back from those battles. And he actually used that tool to help deal with some of the issues he was dealing with when he told me the story and I told him the story back. I said, you have a power greater than anything I can imagine to possess. I'm impressed by it. And he didn't ever see it that way. So I said, if you have that power in that situation to protect others and do your job, why don't we use that same power to protect you? And when you get in these situations, these middle states, and he applied that same principle and really found it to be very, very helpful. And, that's our life. When I look at I'm excited that time is in our vision to control. Time is our world to control. It is part of your perspective. And when you understand that, you can then take this illusion of time and use it to your advantage. And that is that is such a great tool. When you think of examples of time and how people will view them, take what's the gentleman, the Microsoft co-founder that passed away yesterday?
Paul Allen.
His name, Paul Allen, good man, donated a lot of stuff, very, very wealthy. He's worth a couple of $1 billion, I'm pretty sure. And in his current non-physical state, that $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. It has no value, because the most valuable thing to him would be more time. If that were, again, I don't know his personal situation. I mean, I have a belief system that's sort of a little different than that, but I'm just trying to point out that the $1 billion was irrelevant when he had no more time.
Exactly.
So again, within the perspective, if you ask him if he knew he was in the process of dying and was going to die that day, and I'm sure this would be the answer, say, okay, you have $5 billion. If you give it away, you'll have another year. I can imagine he would have said, of course, I'll give it away. Yes, it's gone. One more year would be great.
Sure.
I'm sure he would gladly give it all. Where there are people right now that are literally voluntarily giving away all of their time to try to get money or try to get, in a situation that's not anywhere close to that. So you look at the incongruency of how we're perceiving time and how we spend our time. That's why one of the things that I just love in my day is I have a job that is just the most, I have the best job I think anybody in the country has. I love what I do. I make really good money. I have incredible people I work with. I get to see miracles take place every day. Who has a better job than that? So within that, I have a life that I absolutely love. So when Monday morning comes around, I'm always irritating my friends with really positive Monday morning posts, because I really do love Mondays. I love when the week gets started. I love the fact that I get up every day and I'm excited about what I do. So when you live like that, time, I'm living so much in right now. Time isn't a big factor in my life. And because it doesn't dictate much. Now I do use it as a measurement device, because I like to be very prompt when I do things. When I meet with a client, I like to make sure that, I meet with them exactly when I say I'm going to meet with them. And if I'm going to be late, please let. So I do use time as a marking device of where I need to be, but I try not to let time affect me on a mental or live in regret, or, that's such a hard thing not to do, or fear of tomorrow. And it is a lot better. I know there were days, Walt, when I did not know if I would be able to eat food the next day.
Mm.
It was that bad. And those are not fun times. So no matter what people are going through, I'm not trying to sound like I don't understand. it's hard not to think about being hungry when you're hungry.
Right.
I realize all that. It's hard to not think about your kids. You need to. That's why the law of attraction for so many people and for all of us, I think, as we do this, becomes such a hard, difficult thing to implement because of the reality of things. It's so easy to discuss these things, but until you live it, I get it. I completely get it. I know the 3 days after my son TJ died, in my perspective, I battled that perspective minute by minute, second by second. Now, I knew where I needed to be, but it's hard when you're dealing with that to stay there. It really is.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult place to be. So no matter what, when I'm saying this, I'm sure people that are going through things are saying, well, that's so easy for you to say, Joel, you have it, and you're in such a good position right now. And I am. So I get it's easier to say when you're doing it, but I am telling you the tools that led me to get through that, to get here, are what we're talking about right now.
Which makes sense, because ultimately we can't shift anything in our circumstances until we believe we can shift it. And that sounds so redundant to say that, but it's literally true. Because every moment that we're focusing on all the ways that things aren't working out for us is the same moment that we are focusing on the idea that we cannot shift where we are. You can't literally think about shifting where you are at the same time that you're focusing on things are not going the way I want them to. There's no way to do that. The two are just too far apart. And like you said, anybody who's been in that situation knows when you're in that rough situation, it doesn't matter what the rough situation is. It's going to be different for every person. But when you're in that rough situation, it's about as far away from the happy, good feeling place of everything's working well as you can get.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that is so real. And when you understand that, the reality of your now, when you are aching, or your now is affected by what has happened or what is about to happen, and then so your now is affected, and so that's where the learning these techniques, learning to apply and have them work. You have to actually believe that. That's the reality for most people in understanding. One young lady that I've worked with who's had amazing results using these concepts, is her initial, she said, well, Joel, I read the book The Secret, and I tried to manifest $1 million for the last 6 years, and I can't do it. She said, I tried everything. And I said, well, how have you tried? And she was, she worked for a company. She was sort of a warehousing clerk. And I said, well, how much money do you make now? And she said, well, I make about $45,000 a year. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I said, do you really believe you can make $1 million a year? I mean, maybe you do, but do you really believe it? Well, the secret's, no, what do you believe? Forget what the secret says. What do you believe? She said, well, I don't know how I can do it. I said, so there's not really a belief you can do it, but you're trying hard to believe. I said, but do you believe you can make 60 this year? Now, I know I can do that. I said, so we started with the 60. Well, let's, now it isn't that the law of attraction couldn't bring her $1 million. She really didn't believe it, Walt. That's the key.
And that's why she couldn't bring it.
Once she brought 60, then 70 was envisioned. And within less than a year, she was making 100, but she did it incrementally.
Right.
And she did it, she had a side business, and she had, she always had, I love the term the younger people use, the side hustle. It's an awesome law of attraction tool. There's tons of things out there you can do on a side hustle nowadays. These people are doing, and she did several of those. And well, she got her income up to 100, and then she's able to then incrementally go up. She will eventually get to whatever number she believes she can get to. She's living much more comfortably now because she's believing where she's at. And that's tying it into the time frame when you believe that time's your ally, when you believe all these things are happening, and right now is where your power is, you implement that. When you buy into the historical narrative you've developed, or do you look toward the unimagined future, there's no way this could work out, that's where your now gets violated by by the perspective of time and the impending historical time and the future time. It kills you that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Cindy Chavez, as I mentioned, and I have been doing the Neville Goddard book over the last few episodes that I've done with her. One of her favorite things, actually her favorite thing that Neville Goddard says, is his phrase, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, which is his way of describing living in the now, feeling the now, experiencing the now, and the more that you can do that to really make it real in your imaginary experience is the degree to which it actually becomes real in your experience. And yet one of the most difficult parts about that is feeling in the now, feeling in the imagination now that you've created, this thing that you're trying to imagine. And I mean, for instance, with your example of the young lady you mentioned, she had a great deal of difficulty feeling that $1 million reality she was trying to create. And I sympathize. I mean, I've had the same problem. I think almost everybody has the same problem, not necessarily just with money or even with money. It can be with a wide range of things. But that difficulty involved in feeling the thing that you're trying to imagine and living in that space in your moment right now can be really challenging when you don't have it. Challenging actually is an understatement. It can seem overwhelming.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that's the key to this is being able to actually feel what that feels like. How, I use this example. I actually stole this overall concept from Abraham Hicks' podcast I listened to at one point, or a video that I watched. But if you really want to understand, say you meet someone from some country that doesn't have a lot, and they've really lived on rice and beans their entire life. They don't have anything extra.
Yep.
And they come to the United States and they come up to you and said, "Hey, Walt, what's that thing you're eating?" You say, "Oh, that's a chocolate bar here." "Wow, that looks good. Can you describe to me what chocolate tastes like?" Well, try to describe to someone, how would you describe chocolate to someone who has never tasted anything but rice and beans?
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, because everything, any descriptive you're going to use is going to require some historical belief or understanding based on other things you've tried. If I were to say, it's a very creamy, smooth, it's like very sweet butter. Like what? I don't understand. What's sweet? What's butter? I don't get it. So you have no context. You would have no, right. You'd have nothing in context. And so that's the law of attraction when you're trying to imagine something that you have no context to. That's why it doesn't work. That's the exact same analogy. That's why it doesn't work, is you can describe it all day, but if you don't really know what it's like to not worry about money, to have an abundance or not live in fear of money or relationships. And I want to be clear too, because I get this comment a lot from people. We talk about money a lot. It is probably the main reason people stumble onto the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. It is not why they stay with the law of attraction. So we use money in the beginning. It's irrelevant whether it's money, relationships, or what. It's the abundance of life. But money is the simplest thing that I think where most people come and go from the law of attraction emanates from a money situation. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's
I think so. Like. It's certainly among the top three. I mean, I would say the top three are probably, like you said, money, relationships, and health. Those are the three main categories that I think pretty much drive everybody where LOA is concerned.
Right. Yes. So when you look at that, and you're breaking this down into a very remedial type discussion, but having the ability to live in the moment right now when you've never understood living in the moment, or somebody trying to describe it. So when I describe living in the moment, you get this glass-eyed look of, okay, I've had people say, well, Joel, yeah, my mortgage is still due tomorrow, even though right now I'm in the moment, and so I'm going to get that repossession notice. I said, but what? This is as I told that story, that analogy there came to mind. Several years ago, I was working with a gambler who had gambled himself into a mess, and so I was talking about some of these concepts, and I said, we need to get focused on right now, and he got very mad at me because, Joel, you don't understand. My mortgage is due tomorrow, and I'm going to get served a notice to be evicted, and my family will have no place to live. And you're telling me to live and focus on today. He said, I'm wasting my time here. And I said, well, I said, clearly if you believe that, you certainly are. And he goes, he was really getting infuriated with my rhetoric, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so what, okay, he said, let me just try to live with you for a moment in right now. So what he does, I said, okay, let's break down what you're worried about, but applying the power of right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he calmed down. He said, okay. He said, seriously, my mortgage is 3 months late. I have to pay it tomorrow. I have no other option. I don't know what to do. I said, okay. I said, what did the mortgage company say? And he said, well, here's the letter. Here's what they said. I go, no, what did the mortgage company say when you called them? Silence. He said, well, I haven't called them.
Mm.
I said, well, have you called and told them your problem or told that you're going through some stuff? So making a long story short, he agreed to get on the phone with me, and we called the mortgage company, and I was there, and I explained, I said, we'll call him John. I said, John has been through some financial issues. He's dealing with a medical problem. And the lady on the phone went from being sort of snotty to pretty nice. And she said, well, I'm really sorry to hear that. And she said, this is still due, and we're still going to have to figure out something. But she was getting a little nicer as it went. And so she asked me what I did. And she said, now, who are you? And I said, well, I'm a counselor. Now, I'm trying not to tell her that he's a compulsive gambler, but I'm trying to, at the same time, walk a line. And she said, well, now, what counselor, what kind of work do you do? I said, well, I specialize in addiction work, but I said, I do all types of counseling. And she said, oh, my father's a bad alcoholic. Yeah, I understand addiction. And then he says, well, to be honest with you, this is caused by my addiction to drinking and gambling. And she became super supportive. And she said, look, she said, there are a lot of people having some stuff. She said, we have a program you can go into. And she literally, we worked through, in a 30-minute phone call. She was amazing. She allowed him 30 days to come up with a small percentage. She basically had a way of not officially refinancing, but going on like a 2-year recovery plan to get back on track. And started with very little money, and it kept him in his house. And he was able to realize, he said, I get it. He said, I never could have taken action and now because I was so devastated about what was going to happen tomorrow, but I wasn't thinking clearly. But once I was able to, you helped me calm down and made the call, my power, my existence in right now fixed it, and I was able to do it. And he actually, that helped him with his recovery. He was able to, this has been many years ago, and everything's fine now. He's been in recovery for a long time. So those are ancient memories right now for him, but they were very real at the time. So that's what happens when we're looking at the confines of time, or the fear of time, or the fear of historical time, or the regret of historical time. And so we apply a lot when the only relevant moment in my day is this moment right now. And when I can shut out the clutter and focus on what action I can do to fix any I don't have anything going on in my life that I'm concerned about right now. I mean, everything's flowing smoothly. I'm in great health and all that. So I'm not really, on that urge right now to have any need to intervene, but if something does come up, I have the ability to use this incredible power of now, all my energy and effort exists in now only. And when I can apply that, I'm given this great gift. And that's what it's easy to say until you're in the middle of something. But when you when you figure out how to apply that, your answers from both past and present, your answers for both past and future are in present right now. It's where we exist right now.
It's an ironic thing too, because when we're dealing with stuff like that, like what John was dealing with, his is obviously a pretty severe example of stuff, but stuff can come in all kinds of forms and all levels of difficulty and things to be worried about and anxious about and so forth. That stuff actually blocks us from taking the kinds of inspired action that would help us get out of it. We become almost numbed and immobilized, if you know what I mean. It's almost like we become
paralyzed.
Paralyzed. That's a better word, right? It's almost like we lost our ability to move, and we're just we stuck ourselves. We stick ourselves in a place of immobility, and that's actually the worst thing we can be doing. But nevertheless, because the enormity of whatever it is we're dealing with just overwhelms our brains, it's like we give up.
Yeah. That's such the defense mechanism of stress is not intended. Stress and anxiety has a paralyzing effect. It is meant to be protective, but in reality, it's in modern society has become destructive. The concept of the fight or flight mechanism that our ancestors had, if back in the day, you needed, you had this big old dinosaur chasing you, and he was going to eat you. And yes, audience, I'm aware dinosaurs that don't exist. It's my vision. It's my Flintstone world. So let me live there for a while. Time's irrelevant. I'm adjusting it to make my story work. But the dinosaurs chasing you, and you had two options. You had to, flee, or you had to fight. That was the only two options.
Pretty much.
So the body was prepared to deliver this incredible burst of cortisol and adrenaline and all these great chemicals that increase your strength, and a lot of things happen. Well, that worked back then. Well, that same mechanism exists today. So you get wound up over some event that's happened. And all this cortisol gets released, and then we do nothing. And so those chemicals become a paralyzing agent. It's like you can't think clearly, because while that not digesting your food and having all that adrenaline and all that energy, it serves you in a fight or flight situation. It debilitates you in a situation that requires effort and thought with clarity, because you can't think with clarity when you're in that stressful of a situation. And because you're looking to, how do I flee this, or how do I fight this? And there isn't an answer to that. So what the answer then is when you can stop and take a deep breath, what action fits today? What action gets today? What am my biggest fear for tomorrow? What can I do in today? And that's how you can use time to your advantage, or again, the perception of time to your advantage is today is where it's going to exist. And I need to live there. I need to push myself to a point of understanding that I have this, I have it under control for today. And then when you all it takes is a few of those, and then we're in really good shape. You really start to use that tool in a great way. And there's nothing you can't overcome when you use that concept.
It's funny too, because as you were talking about the fight or flight options, it did occur to me there was a third option that, if we proposed it, would seem to be ludicrous, like totally useless and totally ridiculous and laughable. And that would be to try to negotiate with the dinosaur. Like, let's see if we could look at this from a different perspective. And meanwhile, the dinosaur is chasing you down. That would be a silly thing to do. And yet, in a sense, that's what we're asking ourselves to do. We're asking ourselves to stop and take stock in the middle of being chased by a dinosaur. That's not an easy thing to do. But that's what you got to do ultimately.
Yeah. That's what goes against that goes against our human nature, to take a moment and say, look, I'm going to need to be that guy that's diffusing the bomb.
Right.
Very few people can dissociate from that moment enough to defuse the bomb. He had that incredible ability. If we can develop an ability to step back, look at it, and then be able to apply the proper, the non chemically based overreactions of fleeing or fighting, versus a logical response, or being able to not emotionally attach all that fear to it. Because if you respond to that, if he was responding to the artificial deadline, then it was artificial because it was clearly by the phone call negotiable. But he had made that deadline of time. He'd been paralyzed. The last month before this, he hadn't done anything toward it. He was waiting on this inevitable event. He hadn't told his wife that they're about to be evicted. She had no idea this was going on.
Oh, wow.
He was living with all the stress of all this stuff.
Yeah.
So he's pounding himself and he was paralyzed to take no action. And the day before, this is all going to fall apart. We change the mindset. He makes the call. The actions change. The whole thing's an entirely different direction. Mm-hmm. It fixes it. Now, that call could have been made a month before and saved a lot of stress.
Oh, yeah.
But it got him to that point. If that's, so one way or another, when we have people who are that are listening right now that are facing stuff, and when I say this from all this stuff I'm saying is from a place of empathy because of where I've been. I've lived this. As you have in a lot of ways, Walt, I've lived it. And so this isn't just some radical concept that like, oh yeah, well, Joel's just saying that because, I've lived through this, and these tools have given me the power to be where I'm at today. And this is such an incredible gift that I love to share. The law of attraction has a perspective that applies, and it's a concept that matches a lot of the Buddhist beliefs, the concepts of a lot of different things, that bring you to you being the source of your cure. Whatever ails you, you are the source of your cure, and you have great power within that source. And you can tap into it or you can deny it, but it exists in you. And as long as you're able to believe with all your heart, then it does work.
It's also interesting to me when I've dealt with my own stuff. I'm even dealing with stuff now. As I deal with it, as I continue to try to focus on the now, as we've been talking about today, not worry about the time, get the time out of my thought process, knowing perfectly well that focusing on that time does really nothing to help me at all. All it does is, like you say, it makes me worry, it makes me upset, makes me frustrated, makes me anxious. So that doesn't help at all. So I do need to focus on the now. So I try to focus on the now, and in that focusing on the now, I'm actually pushing myself to do something that's uncomfortable. Because the other part of it is that it's all familiar. I mean, I know about time, right? The time is coming when the thing that I'm fearing is about to be upon me. I know it's there. I believe it's there, and it's coming. Well, yeah. And now that I have successfully focused on that, I have taken away my ability to focus on right now. And in that inability to focus on right now, I've set myself up to make sure that thing comes.
Yes, and that's where the non-emotional law of attraction. It's not picking up. It's not saying, Walt, I'm going to punish you because your thoughts are bad. It's simply saying, Walt, this is what you're putting out there. I have no option but to give it to you.
Yes.
I have, and that's that's the big cycle that we're in with this. That's the big cycle that places you where you're at right now. It puts you in this mindset of whatever the specific events are surrounding your world right now. It puts you there, and you don't have to do anything. If you want to successfully approach this, you then step away from that and say, okay, I almost need to look at this as the bomb diffuser. Right. Here's my bomb. Let me sit back. What avenues do I have to address it? And ignoring it or worrying about it is the absolute opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. Addressing it to whatever level you can address it. That might be phone calls, or that might be, again, I don't know your exact situation, but as we're looking at everything, there will be action steps that in a clear state of mind, you would be able to see that in a stress state of mind that will not come to your mind.
And the one thing that's the worst thing to do is to keep trying to play out, okay, I do this thing now, what happens in the future? Because then first of all, you got out of the now. And second of all, you're posing questions you can't even answer. So you're setting yourself up once again. So you literally are taking steps that you can do right now, and you aren't even worrying about whether or not the steps are going to work. These are the steps I can take now, so I take the steps now, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, and sometimes the step, it may seem ridiculous.
Exactly.
Okay, there's zero action I can take right now, so I'm going to go on a walk or I'm going to watch a funny movie.
Yeah, something.
So yeah, that might be my action. The law of action has amazing results.
Unfortunately, we've run out of action because we've run out of time. But this has been a great conversation, Joel, and I look forward to carrying on the next one next week with you.
Thank you, Walt. It's been great.
And we'll hope that you'll join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.